Is China cheating in trade negotiations? Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. This came up recently because the U.S. Claimed, President Trump claimed that China was cheating on the 90-day tariff pause that was just enacted on May 11th. Back in May 11th, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and some other representatives from the U.S. met with the Chinese counterparts in Geneva, Switzerland, to discuss trade relations. About 5 weeks before that, on April 2nd, China had put a block on exporting its rare earth elements. So on April 2nd, China put a block on exporting rare earth elements. And then about 5 weeks later, the U.S. met with China in Geneva, Switzerland. And what they did is they agreed to a 90-day tariff pause. So the original tariff was 145% the U.S. was imposing on China, 145%. And the 90-day pause reduced the 145% tariff down to 30% on Chinese products. 145 down to 30%. That was the agreement Scott Bessent and the U.S. made with China on May 11th in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay, so what was China required to do? One of the things, there were several things, but one of the things was they were supposed to resume exporting rare earth elements. China has sort of the market cornered on rare earth elements right now. A lot of that is because countries have not worked hard enough to source rare earth elements from their own country or from countries other than China, because there are rare earths all over the globe. So China was required back on May 11th to get the 145% down to 30%. They were required to resume rare earth exports. So what are these rare earth elements used for? They're used in U.S. fighter jets, missiles, drones, and U.S. submarines. I read somewhere that almost 5,000 pounds of, and Navy ships, 5,000 pounds of rare earth elements were used in some U.S. Navy ships. So relying on one supplier is never a good idea in business or for a country. The United States is not the only country making this mistake with rare earths. So that's going to be fixed, believe me, because what China did on April 2nd sent shockwaves throughout the world. They had the market cornered on rare earth elements because they had put in the effort to locate them, mine them. And other countries just decided it's cheaper to get them from China because the cost is low and China's already done the work. That's going to change. That's going to come to an end because of what China did. April 2nd, they said, we're no longer going to give anyone our rare earth elements. So when you have an unreliable supplier, you have to immediately make plans to replace that supplier. And that's what most countries are doing right now. So, but for the time being, for a 90-day pause, the 145% tariff was dropped to 30%. But, is China cheating on this agreement? That's the question in this video, right? So these rare earth elements are used in U.S. military vehicles, solar panels, auto parts, smartphones, computers, artificial intelligence, computer chips, and a lot of other products. So, like I said, the United States is not the only country foolishly relying on one supplier, that being China, for rare earth elements. Here are some other countries. Japan, the European Union, that's 27 countries, the United Kingdom, South Korea, and others are relying on one supplier, China, for rare earth elements. I mean, the reason was obvious. They were cheap. China, they used this tactic that John D. Rockefeller perfected. Enter a market, determine what the going price is for a product or service, and then sell that same product or service for a super low price and put all the competitors out of business. You get all the customers, and then you can control the customers. John D. Rockefeller did that with Standard Oil, and then the government got involved and broke everything up because it was an illegal monopoly. So anyway, so all these countries are relying on China, or at least up till now they have. So China has 90% of the rare earth element market. So the question at the beginning was, is China cheating? Because the United States came out recently and said China is not living up to its commitments it made on May 11th to pause for 90 days the tariffs. So the U.S. accused China of not abiding by the 90-day tariff pause. But if you remember, there was no explanation as to exactly what China was doing in its failure to abide by this agreement. The U.S. came out and said China is not abiding by the agreement with no explanation. So everyone wondered, okay, so you're making an accusation. Exactly what is China failing to do? So here's what China is failing to do. Today, June 4th, European Union auto plants announced they can no longer get access to rare earth elements, and they're shutting down auto plants, auto parts plants, auto supplier plants. So China is, in fact, not abiding by the 90-day agreement, the 90-day pause. The agreement was, among other things, to resume shipping rare earth elements, and they have not resumed that. Because a lot of people thought, okay, so China has stopped importing, China has stopped selling rare earths to the United States. No, China cut off the entire planet from rare earth elements. And if that didn't get all these countries' attention, I don't know what would. So European Union auto plants cannot get these rare earth elements, and they're shutting factories. So the U.S. accusation was actually correct, even though, the exact nature of the violation was not presented. What the U.S. said, President Trump said that China was cheating was right. Just today, this announcement, if you look online, June 4th, 2025, you will find articles of European Union auto plants, and not just in the EU, other auto plants too. What was another one? India. Auto factories in India, same problem. They're not able to get rare earth elements. So China did what John D. Rockefeller did. They have rare earths, find out what the going price is for rare earths on the world market, vastly undercut what everyone else charges for rare earths, and take the market. And now all these countries are in a bad position. China is the John D. Rockefeller of modern times. China has cornered the market on a particular type of product, and now they have cut off the supply, not just to the United States, but to all these countries. So there's some stuff I couldn't fit on the board here. So BMW in Germany announced that its suppliers were running out of rare earth elements. Auto Supplier Association, CLEPA, C-L-E-P-A, in the European Union said that several production lines were shut down due to rare earth shortages. And what they said is China is not approving exports of its rare earth elements. And so apparently only 25% of requests from these countries, requests made to China to get rare earth elements, only 25% of those are being granted. So 75% of the people trying to buy rare earth from China are failing. So that's the problem with having one source, one supplier. It's stupid. So if you're ever in a business situation and you find yourself over-reliant on one supplier because they're cheap, in this case, China was charging, predatory pricing because it's cheap, catch yourself and say, no, I've got to have a plan B. Always have a plan B. So the plan B for all these countries, the US, the EU, Japan, UK, is to find new sources for rare earth elements and pay a fair price instead of always trying to get the lowest price on everything that leads you vulnerable to to countries like China just cutting off the entire world. Be willing or become willing to pay a fair world market price for these things, because what that does is it encourages other regions of the world to develop mining capacity for rare earth elements. When there's a super low price and no one can mine rare earths for that low of a price, they shut down their mines in these countries. But with China saying they're no longer going to provide rare earth elements to the world, it's time for the world to wake up and say, we've got to have a fair world market price. We are no longer going to run to China for the cheapest possible price for rare earth elements and other products. We are going to develop our own capacity, our own suppliers in various countries throughout the world, and never again be subject to a holdup, because that's what this is. This is a holdup. What China is doing with, not just European auto plants, Indian auto plants, the U.S. is being affected. All the countries are being affected. China is holding up these countries, and basically what they want is they want to incite displeasure with the U.S. for the tariff policy. That is the plan. You might say to yourself, okay, it made sense when the U.S. imposed tariffs. It made sense for China to say, we're going to cut off the U.S. We're no longer going to sell rare earths to the U.S. That would make sense, right? Because the U.S. is the instigator, sort of, that is demanding fair trade and erecting tariffs. But China decided, no, we're going to do the same thing to all these countries so they will get mad at the U.S. for enacting tariffs on China. So here's the problem, okay? The tariffs are not a whimsical thing. That the U.S. is not imposing these tariffs just because they want to, just because the U.S. government wants to. It's because our jobs base has vanished in this country. It's the same reason that we're trying to get factories to move to the United States to create more jobs for our citizens. Because when our citizens in this country do not have work, they become impoverished. It creates social problems. And if you have any family members who have lost jobs because of the so-called hollowing out of the U.S. manufacturing base, you know what I'm talking about. So it's not, and the U.S. would prefer not to have to do this. But the problem is China has been acting like John D. Rockefeller and selling things and subsidizing suppliers so that they can sell below cost to steal all the business from all these other countries. So that's going to come to an end. So in my opinion, when China said we are going to stop exporting rare earths, not just to the U.S., who started with the tariffs, we're going to no longer ship rare earths to all these countries, so they will get mad at the U.S. and maybe start cooperating with China. That ain't going to work. That's not going to work because these countries are westernized, they are industrialized, they're rational, okay? And they're going to realize the source of the problem. The source of the problem was a cheapskate mentality of all these countries to find the lowest possible price, and they don't care. They didn't care at the time that it was only one country offering that price. Now they're stuck, and the one supplier has got a noose around their neck and saying, we're not going to let you breathe, right? We're not going to give you rare earths. So that's how we got here. So is China cheating on the May 11th agreement? Answer, yes. If you look online today, June 4th, 2025, just look up European Union auto plants cannot get rare earth elements, and you will find a bunch of articles about it. It just came out today. So the only thing I'm not sure about is why, when our government in the U.S. announced that China was cheating, why didn't they give the details of that? It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure what that was, because that would have demystified things for everyone. You know, why keep us in the dark? Tell us. China's cheating? Okay, how? How are they cheating? So now we know. We know they're cheating. They're not exporting their rare earth elements. And we've got auto factories in the European Union and India and elsewhere shutting down because of that. China is pulling a John D. Rockefeller move on the whole world. It's going to backfire because all these countries are going to start getting their rare earths from elsewhere, and they're going to pay more too because it's worth it. It's worth it to have 10 suppliers of rare earths because if one goes away, you still have 9 more. It's worth it to pay a higher price for that benefit, to have a lot of suppliers to choose from. So if you have any questions about this, you can post questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. And I really want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.